In the cold heart of Europe's dynastic age, where power was traded like coin and crowns weighed heavier than conscience, history bore witness to a royal tragedy veiled in velvet and blood. It was once whispered through the stone corridors of France's most hallowed palaces that a queen had wept not for her country, not for her throne, but for the man she was forbidden to love. This is not the story of a fairy tale courtship. It is a chronicle of a union born from necessity, a love condemned by politics, and a betrayal that echoed through royal courts long after the last candle in her chamber had burned to wax. She was crowned for duty but torn by devotion. Her heart belonged to one brother, yet she was forced to wed another. And in the silken silence of the court, where daggers gleamed beneath smiles, that love would not remain a secret. She was Isabella of Valois, daughter of the powerful Charles VI of France. At the tender age of 6, she was sent from the opulent court of Paris to the windswept palaces of England to wed a king more than 3 decades her senior. Her hand in marriage was not a gesture of love, but a treaty of peace, signed in blood, ink, and desperation. The 100 Years' War had bled both France and England dry. Kings sought peace not in battlefields, but in bedchambers. Her bridegroom was Richard II, the Plantagenet King of England. Regal, cultured, and deeply vain, Richard was a monarch haunted by rebellion and surrounded by enemies. His crown sat unsteady, a gift of birth but not a loyalty. To secure a fragile peace with France, he needed a marriage that would solidify his position. For France, Isabella was a lamb they offered to quiet the lion. She arrived in England swaddled in French silk, her tiny hands trembling under the weight of jewels meant to dazzle a foreign court. Eyewitnesses describe her as graceful as a dove, though as innocent as one too. The marriage was never consummated. Richard himself stated she was yet too young to be a wife in truth. Yet, politically, she was queen, and that was enough. But in the shadow of her childlike crown, a far more dangerous affection was taking root. One that would defy nations, destroy loyalties, and set the course for future bloodshed. Among the English nobles, there was one who lingered too long at court, whose eyes trailed the young queen with unspoken yearning. Henry of Bolingbroke, cousin to Richard, son of John of Gaunt, and heir to the powerful Lancaster line. He was everything Richard feared. A soldier, a favorite of the people, and a rival with royal blood. The court knew of the tension between the cousins. What they did not know, what history only dares to speculate, was the nature of Henry's regard for the child queen. When Richard departed on a military campaign to Ireland in 1399, he made the fatal error of leaving power in uncertain hands. It was then that Henry returned from exile, marched on London, and seized the crown. Richard was imprisoned, his supporters executed, and his fate sealed in a cell where whispers say he starved to death or was murdered. Isabella, then barely 9, was widowed without warning. Her status as queen evaporated like fog on the Thames. England's crown now rested upon the head of the very man who may have watched her with secret affection. Henry IV was now king. Those sources remain conflicted, guarded by the veils of time and propriety. The royal court murmur of Henry's interest in Isabella, not merely as a former queen, but as a woman. He proposed marriage to her once Richard was dead, a union that would have legitimized his reign further, silenced opposition, and perhaps quenched a personal desire that had festered in silence. But Isabella, now grieving and politically orphaned, refused him. Her sorrow for Richard, whether born from affection or from trauma, was real. "I will not marry the man who murdered my husband," she is reported to have said. This bold defiance was no small act. In rejecting the King of England, she risked her life. But her heart, historians believe, belonged elsewhere. Henry was not the only son of John of Gaunt. There was another, Thomas of Lancaster, a quieter figure, less ambitious, more poetic, and more gentle. In courtly records, Thomas was often dismissed as irrelevant. But in secret French correspondence recovered decades later, there are veiled references to the younger Rose of Lancaster, who met her by moonlight in the gardens of Westminster. Was this the brother she loved? The evidence is sparse, but compelling. A poem found in the archives of Rouen speaks of a young lioness tamed not by crown, nor by conquest, but by a gaze not meant for her. It references a secret alliance, hidden meetings, and a promise broken by betrayal. The author remains unknown, but scholars have long believed it was penned by a French courtier close to Isabella. If the affair was real, it never reached public scandal. In the age of kings, women's hearts were not matters of state, unless they threatened it. But what did reach public record was Isabella's eventual return to France in 1401. Stripped of title and honor, her dowry never fully returned. She was no longer Queen of England. To France, she was a political asset wasted. Yet France did not let her rot in obscurity. A new marriage was arranged, this time to Charles, Duke of Orleans, a man closer to her age and station. She became Duchess of Orleans at 16, far from the English court, far from Henry and Thomas. It seemed her story would end there, quietly, respectably, forgettably. But fate had not finished its cruel designs. Only 3 years after her second marriage, Isabella died. Some say it was childbirth. Others whispered darker tales of poison and wine, of a French noble jealous of her English fame, or even a revenge plot from England itself. The truth remains buried beneath centuries of royal dust. What is undeniable, however, is the way her death reshaped dynastic Europe. Her husband, Charles of Orleans, would later be captured at the Battle of Agincourt and held prisoner in England for 25 years. His lineage and influence would help fuel the spark that led to Joan of Arc's campaign. And in time, his descendants would merge with the Valois, paving the road to the Wars of the Roses, where the houses of Lancaster and York would devour one another, brother against brother, over the very crown Henry had taken. Had Isabella lived, had she accepted Henry, had she loved his brother in secret and been discovered, the balance of European power might have shifted entirely. A child from such a union could have unified the thrones of France and England, ending the 100 Years' War in a single generation, or plunge it into even deeper chaos. In the end, Isabella remains a figure caught in the crosswinds of empires, used as a pawn, but remembered as a ghost. Her portrait survive, pale, solemn, eyes averted as if looking toward a past she could not escape. In her silence lies a tale of love betrayed, of politics masquerading as devotion, and of the dangerous consequences when kings and queens forget that hearts do not heed borders. History does not grant her a voice, but the whispers remain. Behind the walls of Windsor, in the ruins of Westminster, in the yellowed parchment of treaties, and the marginal notes of letters long ignored, her story survives. Fragile yet defiant, she was forced to marry a king, but it was his brother who held her heart. And in the kingdoms of men, where crowns are won with daggers and defended with lies, that is perhaps the most unforgivable betrayal of all.